The dreams. Thank you. Sorry again. Please shut the door. Good night. Ah, take two. Officially. I was having a conversation with a young woman who trusts my judgment enough to be open about where she was in her self-development journey. And we covered a lot of ground in a short time, funny enough. But the particular conversation that inspired this video was the one we had around self-love, because it opened my eyes to something that I already knew I was practicing, and in that line made me to realize that this kind of answers should be put out there. Because again, self-love is a very, would I say, popular thing that people talk about, but they really don't go deep into the nitty-gritty of things. And it was that conversation that inspired this video, so shout out to her. One thing me and this young lady share in common is we like to be realists. We like to tell ourselves the truth. And you'd understand why I am using air quotes in a bit. When you move from being an ignorant optimist to a bitter pessimist, or let me use my case. I went from being a very optimistic and delusional person to a very pessimistic person, but I colored it with the context of being a realist. When life breaks your heart and you realize life is not Hollywood or all the beautiful things you read in Wattpad, and you think that to protect your heart and your ego and your emotions, it is easier to prepare for all the negative things at once, or come up with contingencies. Plan A, part two, plan B in case plan A, part two doesn't fall through, and all that fancy stuff. Yeah, you think preparing for all those things would make the blow easier. Newsflash, it doesn't. Where am I headed to with this? In the context of self-love, yes, I mentioned that we share a common trait, which is being realists. And what does this look like? As someone that realized I could get easily overwhelmed with 10 ways to overcome one thing, I don't want this video to be that long unnecessarily, or typically that overwhelming. There's such a thing as, is it TMI? Yes, too much information. So I'd handle the conversation on self-love from one aspect, which is words, how we relate with ourselves. That brings me back to being a realist. In my case, it could be saying in instances where I do something that does not, thank you, Jesus. In instances where I do something that does not match the brilliance that I know I have, you can easily find me saying stuff like, "Oh, I'm so stupid. You're so dumb. How can you be so stupid? You're They were right. You're a foolish person. You're not that smart. Maybe you're not as smart as you were." And this was my own way of being realistic, right? Or times where I set goals and I don't accomplish them, and I say, "There you go again. There you go again, leader girl. You can never keep your word." You know, my mentor says this thing where there's a reason that words are spells, or to better say that, it says the reasons why words are constructed, or the process to which a word is constructed, is by putting letters together. right? At least in the English language. And how do you put those letters together? You spell them. And when you think of casting spells, who comes to your mind? Exactly. Those Disney witches, Barbie witches, and everything in your mind. So when my mentor said that, very casually, funny enough, I'm remembering the instance, and my mind popped open because truly every word you speak over your life is casting a spell. Our subconscious does not know the difference between real life and fake life. So it will not know that, yeah, you're saying, oh, I'm such a fool. It wouldn't know that it's because you feel like a fool in the moment, right? And you think self-love is operating from the form of hate. Yes, what most of us call being realistic so that our emotions are not hurt when things go according to plan is actually self-hate. And the litmus test for that is easy. When you do something that you don't like, you are realistic about how the situation made you feel stupid, right? And then you absorb that as an identity. You say, oh, I'm so stupid. And your subconscious writes it down. XX person is stupid. All right, so we have to keep that identity up, right? Yes, casting a spell over your life. But when you do something good, do you tell yourself how amazing you are? At least when validation that is outside of you recognizes your value, do you say thank you with a smile, or do you say, "Ah, don't flatter me. Ah, you're just whining me. Oh, this, oh, that. Oh, this, oh, that." That's the litmus test for you to know if you're really a realist or you are just your biggest hater. But I want to stay on track with this, right? So where were we? Casting spells with your words. So when I became a realist, and it is so easy, and it's still something I'm recovering from. I have done much better, but I fall back into that loop from time to time. And when I realized that, man, I did this for a long time, saying all the hateful words all the time. I'll start the gym era, and then one day I take ice cream or I am low on energy and I take something sugary and it absolutely ruins my day and I'm beating myself. Trust me, I think I have thick skin because there is nothing you will tell me that I haven't already told myself. But can I be honest with you? In instances where someone else confirmed, maybe out of spite, maybe out of envy, maybe out of giving me constructive criticism, but with a malicious tone. In all of those instances, even though I have told myself that I'm very stupid and foolish, hearing somebody else confirm that, it still hurts like crazy. And I remember sitting there and saying, so what's the point of telling myself this if it's not going to change the impact of the blow on my pride if somebody else still says that to me? Right? Exactly. So how to self-love? How do you operate from self-love? Or how do you know that at least you're beginning to transition to operate from self-love? The one tip I can give you, which is not a tip, it is a lifelong way of living that I am trying to still adopt and honor, is to forgive yourself in the moments that you hurt yourself. I'll give you one example from my life. There was one time I was on my very, not there was one time, I'm still on the journey, but on one of my very new phases of, oh, I'm going to gym, I'm going to, and by gymming I meant doing skipping rope, right? At least I had come out of the phase where if I didn't think I was in a gym, I wasn't doing anything. So I started to skip in front of my hostel room door. And I was consistent for a week, for 2 weeks. I could do 100 skips in less than 60 seconds. And I was gunning for 500 in 5 minutes. In fact, I had a crazy thing about beating the Guinness Book of World Records for the most skips in a minute, but that's a sermon for another Sunday. Where was I? Yes. On one of those days, or during that period, I worked on my eating habits. I was waking up earlier. I was not being as late to class as I am known to be, at least in my head. I was always late to class. But when you're waking up at 5 a.m. to do skipping rope and some yoga, after a couple of days, it's not so hard to just continue on that energy, right? And I remember one day I was so tired. I was famished even, and I was low on energy, and I just picked up one of my favorite cookie biscuits. I'm not going to mention the name just to make myself feel they've not sponsored this summer. I'm such a dreamer. Where was I? So yes, I picked up my favorite sugar high cookies and I ate it. And I felt so bloated because another thing about me is I am lactose intolerant, right? But I felt so bloated in that moment and I was very angry with myself. For some reason, I hadn't lashed out loud. What happened? I proceeded to take my shower that evening, and I remember just, for some reason, it must have felt like I was in a movie. I turned on the shower, even though I have a full head of hair. I turned on the shower and I stood in silence. I cannot remember whether or not I was playing the music in the background, but I turned on the shower, and for the first time in my life, I hugged myself. Genuinely, I hugged myself as the water was running through the nook and crannies of my body, and I said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry, LB, for doing this to you. We'll try again tomorrow. And it was as if a veil lifted off my eyes, but I didn't want to lose the feeling of that moment. So I held on much longer, and I can almost bet 500 naira, my hard 500 naira, that I broke into a smile in that moment. Because for the first time in my life, I parented myself the way I wished my parents at least handled my idiosyncrasies and, of course, outbursts and everything in between. But I gave that to me. I told myself I'm sorry for causing myself pain because of the short-term pleasure. And I forgave myself because I said it out loud. And the next day, I looked at that sugar high cookie biscuit and I walked past to class. And I was so proud of myself because on the flip side, what would have happened is I would have gone down the toxic path of there you go, you've done it again, you that day, you can never keep your word, you promised, you wrote it down, you prayed, you this, you that, and all of a sudden you're back at square one. And the next day I'm buying two cookies, and the next day I'm buying three cookies. Before you know, I've stopped skipping and I'm back at the weight that I am trying to lose. To conclude, what have I been saying? In today's sermon on how to self-love, forgive yourself in the moment. And I'm not saying be delusional and look at yourself in the mirror and start saying, I am this, I am that, or doing baseless affirmations. I also believe too much of everything is not good. There are extremes. I was on one extreme after coming from another extreme. And as someone that operates on that high, trying to find some middle ground has been what my own growth journey has been about. And in that moment, I knew I was closer to finding those answers that I asked myself in the middle of the night. So yes, now I can be delusional, but knowing that I'm beginning to take steps in line with a habit I have been trying to cultivate for a while was empowering. And I felt the responsibility, the burden to share this with someone, anyone, with you, because I wish someone could tell me this, but it takes a certain kind of insight to know that this is what works. And that has been showing up in my life in different ways. So apply this. Maybe tell me how it goes. I'll see you.